Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
Canis Albinus.
Makahlua.
TheMeInTeam.
MegaBearsFan.
Welcome to episode 360 of the PolyCast. I'm Makahlua, and with me again, DanQ.
And the sun is shining.
Oh yeah, not here in Texas today, unfortunately. TheMeInTeam.
Bringing that special warm feeling to you.
Is it a nuke?
Well, maybe.
MegaBearsFan.
Why aren't things working? Why has YouTube forsaken me?
I think the
I
question
don't
you should be
know.
asking is why has it not forsaken you before now?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people have asked that question at one point or another regarding YouTube.
Especially regarding streaming.
Yeah.
You know what our mistake is? Getting emotionally invested. That's the problem. That's the problem right
Yeah.
there. Well, see?
Yeah.
That's right. If you never love, you can never lose. Wow.
Just
a
never
good
love
lesson right there.
anyone or anything, and you'll be perfect for the rest of your life, except you'll be really lonely and sad.
Well, listen.
You're failing, Ben. You're not supposed to have emotions like that. What kind of robot are you?
Things would be predictable then, Mackie.
I'm
So
the
we can
neat kind of robot you don't know isn't human.
So that can be one item in the positive column, many in the negative column, but at least it would be a constant.
Show you consistency.
I'm sure you would if I gave you the opportunity.
The people are the heroes now. Behemoth goes the peasants now. The people are the heroes.
So, wow, haven't heard that one for a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got some actual feedback from the last live stream, which is the source of my frustrations with YouTube at the moment, because one of the complaints was audio balancing, which has been a problem for the entire year, I think, so far, where some of us are way too quiet and others are way too loud, and it's not good for the live streamers. Well, I thought I had fixed that by tweaking volume levels, but now the stream might not be working at all. So we may or may not be live right now. I don't know. Everything on my end says it's working, but everyone else, here, all of our other co-hosts said they went to the YouTube channel and it says it's not live. So maybe we're live and people can listen. Maybe we're not. I don't know. But anyway, we got a comment from, what was his name? Steve Spain from episode 359 with some other things besides technical issues. What a series of questions. I don't know if we're going to go through every single one of these, but I guess we can start with him asking how good are the devs at playing their own game and how does it impact their design strengths and flaws? How much have they learned from the development of AI in other areas as well as their own past? And are there games in the genre which do AI or aspects thereof better with the same or greater level of complexity? With the follow-up question being, does the community modding make the AI better? So I guess we can field that one first. I don't know. How good do we think Firaxis is at playing Civ?
Do we have evidence in their case? I haven't seen a lot. I would imagine that, like every previous iteration of Civ, the elite players are way better than the devs, but that the devs would win on at least the middling difficulties pretty easily, would be my guess. But I don't know for sure. Maybe they have some people who just like string deity wins.
And I'm sure it probably varies from individual developer to individual developer. I mean, we are
for
talking
sure.
about a team of dozens of people. So, and probably not even all of them are necessarily gamers. I mean, there could be guys who are, not guys, but guys or gals there who are just programmers and it's just a job, like for all we know, and they don't even play games. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or maybe they are all hardcore strategy gamers and they, play every, game that comes out and manage to do that despite having a 9-to-5 or longer job, because my understanding is video game companies tend to exploit their workforces quite a lot and make them work like 60, 80-hour weeks regularly. I really hope that doesn't happen at Firaxis, but it's a pretty common practice at a lot of developers, especially as they near release and enter the so-called crunch.
I would imagine that when at least the devs who are making design decisions, there's some expectation that they play the game and know it.
One would
But certainly
hope
wouldn't
so.
need that for everything that's being worked on the game. Like if you're like making art assets or in principle, audio for sure, that kind of stuff, you wouldn't need any gameplay experience whatsoever to be even very good at it.
Yeah,
Heck, even the play testers don't necessarily, or the bug testers, QA people don't even necessarily have to be good at the game, because the way that QA testing works is they are just playing the like exact same game situation or save file repeatedly, trying to replicate bugs. Whether or not they're actually playing the game with any degree of expertise is irrelevant to finding bugs.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you would just need a baseline understanding of how the mechanics are supposed to be working, and that's about all you need for them. It helps to have a bit more nuanced understanding. They would probably make their job faster, but you wouldn't need it to do it well.
There's probably certain developers on the team that do the high level, like putting together the systems and things like that, who probably would play at a higher level because they have the understanding of how the systems work together and stuff. But yeah, a lot of the average guys doing the programming, other things, it could be anywhere from noob to probably, it might be a deity plater in there somewhere. I don't know.
I remember the Civ 4 dev saying that they didn't have anybody that could play like the people did, like the best players did.
Well, that would
doesn't surprise
some of
me.
the air quote fixes that are not exactly, it fixes some things, but then it makes it worse for other things,
Yeah. Sometimes you get patches that change things that kind of suggest that the people doing the design in that moment don't know the game that well. The Civ 4 patch to the protective that broke overflow is a good example of that. But even in Civ 6, I don't know. Sometimes the balance changes are a little head scratching, but I don't think nothing comes to mind in Civ 6 that's as egregious as the 3.19 patch in Beyond the Sword. So that's good at least.
So I think in that respect, I think in that respect from the
that game as well.
Yeah, it was the final patch for that game. Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately.
So maybe from that, seeing as how we didn't see something similar to that in Civ 5 and presently in Civ 6, I think they have learned from their development. As for how well they play the game, like Phil said at the outset of this particular topic, we don't have really any meaningful evidence behind that. There's anecdotal things, such as watching some live streams that they've done in the past, more for Civ 5 than necessarily Civ 6. But then again,
those are really hard to gauge, though, because a lot of times that's just marketing stuff. So they're just playing to demonstrate the features,
to show
and not
off
necessarily,
things.
Yeah, playing to show competence.
We also know that Firaxis has said that, well, we're not really designing the AI to win, so we're designing them to just play, to try to interact with the mechanics and somehow seemingly have it, come together. So
which that's a cop out. They do say that, and it's a cop out, and I will say that every time it comes up. That it is not solid design at all, and it cannot be.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, Dan, that's not a valid argument to bring into this conversation. I was going to be like, hey, now, okay, you went a different way.
Well, the argument the devs make isn't valid.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because the problem is, like, if you have an inconsistency between behavior and mechanic, and you don't like the behaviors that arise from your mechanical rules, you have a problem with your mechanical rules, and you should fix your mechanical rules. But the devs don't see it that way, and they're wrong in this particular case.
As for how well they play the game, of course, that depends on, well, tying into a little bit of that, how are they measuring, and even how is Steve Spain measuring how well they play their own game? Is that to, in fact, victory conditions? Is that to their own victory conditions? What difficulty levels? What
competitive
civs,
MP?
What map types, etc. Yeah, multiplayer versus single player. So that's a really actually difficult question to answer. I mean, we do know that they have said that, and we've seen photographic evidence, at least in the past, that look at all these other games that they have in their studio, and the developers have a chance to play them and see what can be learned from those games. And I don't think there's really nothing we can say that's inherently unique in Civ in terms of necessarily mechanics, that we see influences from other games, both computer, video, and board, quite honestly.
To be fair, I have a lot of books on the bookshelf right behind me, but that does not mean that I have read all of them, or even maybe any of them. Eyes darting back and forth.
No, it's true. It's true. It may very well just be a nice backdrop, and that's it decorates your furniture in your office, etc. As for does the modding community make the AI better? I think that's a bit subjective. Better in terms of, I don't know, the AI being able to play in order to win.
Well, we don't have access.
The mod community in Civ 5 and 4, both Civ 4 and 5, really drastically improved the AI. Like they did such a good job that like it's as close to as objectively improved as you can get without like being outright objectively improved. They really strengthened it considerably in both games. I have not checked for Civ 6.
I assume, though, that those mods were probably written when the source code was released. So, and the source code, as far as I know, has not yet been released for Civ 6. So I don't know how much the modders even can do at this point with AI, because a lot of that's probably in the C++ distributables. And, I don't know how much you can do through just, Lua scripting hooks. I think Lua is still the scripting language they're using for this one. I haven't done any modding for Civ 6. I did a little bit for 5, so I don't know what the differtions are. I know that they said Civ 6 was supposed to be more user-friendly, and there were supposed to be more scripting hooks to allow the modders to do more complicated things without the source code DLLs, but I don't know how extensive that allows AI modification.
I think it's a little early to say that for Civ 6, seeing as how it's a game that, for all intents and purposes, seems to still be in development, because how many times is it that, hey guys, remember that mod I came out with? Yeah, the patch came out and it broke it. Hey, I fixed it. I just fixed it in time. Hey, the new patch came out and it broke it. So
yeah, and there might also be, even if it's possible, there might be a lot of modders who just aren't doing those sorts of things because they're worried about exactly that. I don't want to spend, however many hours and all my sweat and tears and labor making a mod for Firaxis to release a patch a week later that completely breaks everything, and now I got to go back and read.
This is not to denigrate modders who, for example, I'm just releasing artwork, but having that impacted by a patch in the future is nowhere near as likely as someone who's gone and made a modification to a mechanic.
Case in point, back in Civ 5, I was actually working on a fairly large-scale mod that completely reworked the tech tree. One of the things that they had support for in the modding for Civ 5, and I don't want to go too much into this and turn this into ModCast, but they actually had support in the modding for Civ 5 for and/or tech prereqs in Civ 5 on the tech tree. So if you remember in Civ 4, there were a lot of techs where you could research like one prereq or the other, and you would unlock the next tech instead of always having to research both. Well, they had support for that in Civ 5 in the modding, and I actually had rearranged and rewrote the entire tech tree for the vanilla game to support that. And when I was like 75% like through, they released I think it was Brave New World. I don't remember which. It was one of the expansions. It was either, or they announced it. They didn't release it. They announced it, and I saw that the tech tree was going to change, and I stopped work on that mod, waiting for the expansion to come out. And then when the expansion came out, I started, doing the same thing for the expansion pack. But then everything exploded to be so much work that I never actually got around to finishing and releasing it, because I ended up running into like a handful of little bugs that I was never able to fix. And I didn't want to release it with those bugs still in the mod, so it never got released.
And Steve Spain kind of acknowledges, modders make the game great where it was launched quote-unquote okay and interesting in between expansions because of the diversity of ways in playing the game offers. And I think given the popularity of modders' excellent work, then leaving the access to the code for so long is just silly, because there are desires of end users which just aren't available given the limitations at present, quote-unquote. And yes, that's absolutely true, and hopefully that does change at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not of interest to me, modding specifically, in terms of getting involved in that. And part of that is just time, and part of that is my own sense of competency of doing such a thing. But I'm definitely not going to try to presume that, since I'm not involved in it, it's not important, or it's not had a significant impact on Civ, because it has. Because it does extend the longevity for those looking for something different, and those people that want to flex their creative muscles. They want to try something different, and quite honestly, a lot of modders say, I actually have no idea how to play the base game, I only play my mod. So there's room for everybody there. Okay, as for the next part of the message, ... from Steve Spain.
Yeah, so he also talks a little bit about the actual corporate responses from Firaxis, the sometimes long droughts of information followed by tons of information when they actually make announcements, and he says that he doesn't buy the damned if you do, damned if you don't excuse, and feels it's kind of a scapegoat. I don't know if that's necessarily worth talking about here, because that's going to be a matter of opinion. And I think we already talked about that the last time anyway. But then
I just want to say on that by the very fact that you're bringing that up, Steve Spain, I think, in fact, they are damned if they do, if they're damned if they don't, because you brought it up. And to be clear, it wasn't my defending 2K and Firaxis not saying something. It was just trying to think about why haven't we heard anything since September 2019.
Well, and the other excuse would be, take like companies are very hesitant about releasing early information for something that's in development because the thing's going to change considerably. I mean, like, look at, recent examples like something like No Man's Sky, right? The uproar about all the features that were promised that weren't in the game, and, the questions of whether or not the No Man's Sky developer was like actively lying and misleading the public about what was going to be in the game, or whether it was just stuff that got scrapped because they weren't going to be able to finish it. Did Sony put pressure on them to release it early to meet some deadline, and they couldn't put in the mechanics that they were planning on putting in?
I want to say that's not really apples to apples when it comes to like that versus this, though.
Yeah, I would at least like for Firaxis to, have confirmed, 6 months ago or something that, hey, we are still planning updates on the game. We're not abandoning it. It's not done. So that, like I said last time, I know whether or not to take those disclaimers off my strategy posts on whether the game's still a living game or not.
I mean, they don't have to advertise features that they will then not be able to include later. They could just say their general direction of what they're working on or whatever. You don't have to make a commitment to the degree that No Man's Sky did,
right?
When you're talking about the game.
Yeah, and it feels like at some point, once 2K came in and their publisher, that they've not let them communicate with the community as much.
Yeah, there's that too. It might not be Firaxis, it might be 2K.
Yeah.
Or actually, it almost certainly is 2K that's controlling what information, comes out of the studio. Firaxis might want to tell us all about the awesome things that they're working on and planning, and 2K might be like, nope, can't do it.
Seems bizarre. I don't know what 2K is on about, but I mean, it's not the first time that 2K's done some weird stuff.
I mean, we know that there has been no news from Firaxis in September, but there has been Civ news, not just necessarily the Civ news that those of us probably listening to this podcast have, which is being PC Civ users, because there was stuff about Mac and Linux, and in particular, Civ on console platforms. And it may very well have been that 2K is like, okay, stuff's going on behind the scenes for the PC stuff, but maybe they came to the decision that we don't want to try to muddle the communication and have too many things coming out at once. But yes, I would like to see even Firaxis to say, yes, we're still here, we're working on it, you're going to love it, maybe tease something, anything, but honestly just, hi, we're still
Hi,
here.
we're alive. Yes, you saw the D post, something's going on, but we can't talk yet, but just hang on. We're almost there, something.
You had one job.
Yep.
Well, and another issue, exacerbating circumstance right now is the pandemic. So there could also be the thing where right now maybe Firaxis and 2K would like to be able to tell us, what's going on, but they have no idea when or if the stuff is even going to come out because maybe there's been, disruptions to, the company and development that, we are not privy to. So, who knows? Like, a lot of stuff is just up in the air right now.
It's true.
But yes, so Steve Spain then goes on to provide actual feedback about some of the feature ideas that we had talked about. One of which was the idea of plagues that spread from city to city, and he says that referencing the book Guns, Germs, and Steel, that it's such an important part of history, and not having it in the game is, quote, a problem for me. Unquote. And then another interesting thing that he brings up is the idea of latitude and longitude having more meaning in the game. And I'm not quite sure what exactly he means by this. I don't know if any of the rest of you know, but things like maybe about differences in temperature and stuff like that, where, soldiers that come from, a Northern European climate and then go and take actions in Africa are going to have a lot harder time acclimating to the environment than, those African soldiers.
That's not actually true,
How do you express that, though? Is that takes them longer to heal, or they get a negative to their melee strength or something? I mean...
Yeah, I don't know what...
There's no substantive basis for that in real life, so it would be silly to put it in the game.
Yeah, I don't know what his sources are or what exactly he's thinking here, but...
Well, you could have
let us know.
More different terrains depending on geographic location. That could work.
Yeah, there are such things as tundra desert as opposed to the normal Sahara desert that we all tend to think of. And, tropical or rainforest climate can also mean Seattle as well as Brazil. It has to affect the rainfall, not the temperature.
And I wouldn't mind seeing more variations in altitude represented in the game as well, with there maybe being highlands and lowlands and plateaus. They did a little bit of that in Gathering Storm with the coastal lowlands that will flood. But I mean, as far as I know, it doesn't have any other relevance to gameplay other than whether or not it floods when global warming happens.
And what would you do with stuff like that in gameplay? You have to remember the scope of Civ 6 is pretty broad and high level. Like even some of the worst plagues in history would span a single turn in the early game of Civ 6.
Well, again,
so you have to be careful with some of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's all abstractions, and I don't ever think that that's nearly as big of a problem as other people make it out to be. Again, citing this example of I've had a scout wandering around exploring for 10,000 years. So
yeah, that same guy.
Yeah.
And Steve, and Steve Spain is referencing longitude and latitude and referencing, quote unquote significant European population. So he's basing it on Earth. And of course, most of the maps I expect people play and most of the map scripts they're Earth-like, but they're not Earth. So longitude and latitude necessarily don't have the same meaning either.
Yeah, we even have one where the pole or the ice cap is in the middle. So.
And maybe he's talking less about like military units and warfare and more about like actual like settlements, colonies and stuff like that, having issues if the environment is considerably different than where they come from. But again, I don't know how much precedent in history there is for
you'd have to have the civs starting always in their like historical terrain. Like Norway needs to start in an ice or tundra, icy, snowy area, or and then now what, you penalize Norway if they want to go settle where it's a little bit warmer, like just Northern Europe, but it's a little bit warmer, so now they get a penalty. That I don't know.
You could do something like Heroes of Might and Magic 3 did with it, where like you get a penalty in hostile terrains to you, but then your home terrain you move normally. You could do something like that. I don't know that Civ really needs that in particular.
Some Civs have that as like a bonus power. Like I think in Civ 5, Russia had some power that related to combat in its home territory, I think.
Yeah. And like it was the degree of significance it has in Heroes 3 would not be appropriate in a Civilization game, because the difference between human beings is just not that large. I can buy it with mythological creatures for obvious reasons, but I don't know. Like there's not that much difference between people. There's some difference between people, but not like that.
There's lots of justification for a saurian species not, invading, Norway or Russia in the middle of winter. And, not so much necessarily for a human population. Yeah, it did have an effect in actual history, but like, the Russian soldiers suffered just as much as the German soldiers. It's just they ended up winning the battles.
And plus, like, if you're trying to like cross distances in, say, Africa or something, the limitations of potable water, the limitations of calories available to your soldiers, all that, like, that was a problem for African people too. And there's a reason that you didn't see invasions across some terrains very frequently in history.
Yeah.
Regardless of who was leading or in the area at the time.
Which kind of leads into what Steve Spain talked about in the next paragraph.
Yeah, which is the idea of having military units cost population, which we did have in Civ colonization, and also the idea of both gold and food being an upkeep cost. Actually, an idea that I've considered in the past, because I actually think there is maybe some room in Civilization for having a military and warfare system that's more designed around temporarily levying troops and then disbanding them when you don't need them anymore, rather than maintaining massive armies for the entire game.
It's just so tough with the turn system and the amount of years involved.
Yeah, true. I mean, yeah, it would require a lot of reworks. Like, that's not necessarily something you could just plug into Civ 6 and everything would be fine. But the idea of armies needing food and having actual supply lines and stuff like that, it's something that they've abstracted with the ideas of like not being able to, or healing more in friendly territory and healing less in non-friendly territory. So like it's in the game, but it's very, very highly abstracted.
I think it needs to be, though, because like if you get into the weeds on that, you can really get into the weeds on that. Like the constraints of supply for armies varied a lot based on the historical period in question. Like to the extent that you could not put a single mechanic in the game and accurately represent it in the time span of Civ. You cannot do that. It's impossible. You would have to literally change supply with era. And not only that, but you would have variable supply constraints for nations based on their present technology level, or would it be based on the units in question? Like, this is like major weeds stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I start thinking about supply lines and my mind goes to an older Civ-like and real-time title, also a real-time title in the form of Rise of Nations where there were supply lines. But then it's about the scope of Civ, like Phil is also getting at. And then I think about how is that abstracted, just like you said, Jason, that healing time that is needed, it's okay, that's about, for example, supply lines getting caught up and soldiers having a chance to rest before they're asked to go into battle again. I mean, you can choose not to heal them. That's also a choice. It's not like, oh, they can't move, they're healing right now. Like, that's entirely up to you. It's just within the scope of the game, I think the abstraction is the better way to go, at least certainly as we are conceiving Civ right now. And as soon as I start thinking about, well, how could we have the supply lines in there? Is it in there? Well, yeah, I mean, there is, there's a, what is it called?
There's the medic and the supply
medic, that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, modern era, we already have some units that do that. You could, if you wanted to add this to Civ right now, add some ancient era units that did a similar thing.
Well, alternatively, you could rework those units. So maybe the medic and supply convoy unit, or the supply convoy at least, works kind of like a trade route, where maybe you send it to your frontline military units from a city, and it improves their healing or combat effectiveness or whatever. And then that's something that the opponent actually has an opportunity to cut behind the lines in order to weaken your force. So there's maybe some valid strategic things that could go on there. But again, you're talking about, where's the line between something that's as abstract on the level of the civilization game and something that's so nitty gritty that it just doesn't work, not only with the scale of the game, but with the turn structure of the game. Or alternatively, you could make the supply convoy be built with food instead of with production. So like there is an indirect food cost to supplying your military unit. So there's ways to do that at the high level of civilization.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, if you did something like that, it could work. It would still be a little silly for some units versus others, but it would work as a broad abstraction if you did something like that.
I mean, right now we even have that with regards to even the healing. There is the inconsistency, for example. I don't know to say this is a bad thing. It's certainly a design choice that, oh, yep, you can tell your land units to heal anywhere, but unless your naval unit is particularly promoted to heal outside of, friendly territory, it's not going to be able to heal. So maybe is that then a basis to have a supply line? Or do we want to extend what's currently available with the later, the convoy and the medic, have that be in the game from the beginning, so it's not so the unit can heal, which is already kind of abstracting the supply and the medic stuff, and now there's a medic unit to kind of accelerate that? I mean, you could have that be more consistent across the unit types and across the length of the game. That might be interesting, but you got to keep it within the perspective of the scope of the game, because when I read supply lines, I think of a game out of a very different scope and also more real-time stuff than I think turn-based. And then in his last paragraph, he had a Canadian moment because he said, please. Huh.
And it made Dan very happy.
That's true. I did. It did make me happy. I was like, okay, we might end up agreeing to disagree on the damned if you do, damned if you don't front there, Steve Spain, but I do agree on the use of the word please. It is fantastic. That is green text with me. Green text. I know that's more previous Civ titles than this one, but still is. You wanted a co-op victory. Yes, please. And also to agree with Phil, I agree meaningful, useful, and accurate user interface should be patched in and not a DLC. Well, yes, anybody who thinks that should be a DLC. Well, we're just going to put you over here. I didn't say where there was. It might be a better place than us. I don't know.
Go sit in the opposite corner.
And then there was also but I can leave it to you here, Jason, where he talks about one of the things that he'd like to see in Civ 7. Whoa, Civ 7. Whoa. I think, as I've said before, Civilization 6 has given Firaxis and 2K too much pressure. The next Civ title will be Civ 8. Yes, we finally need to skip a number. We need to do the Microsoft Windows kind of thing and just mess with the numbers. Okay. The actual suggestion.
It's Civ Vista.
God. Civilization Vista. No, Civilization Bob. There we go. You see, kids.
Not Bob. No Bob.
There you go. The
Fine.
UI could always be worse. We could have Civ Vista.
Fine, Civilization Clippy.
just hearing Civilization Vista is like causing some internal cringe. That's impressive.
I just threw up a little in my mouth.
Oh, I forgot that muscle twitch that way. Oh, look at that. I feel that. But Steve Spain wants to do away with a certain something that has kind of been, well, integral to Civ since Civ 1 in terms of civilization structures.
Yeah, he posited the idea of, I think, getting rid of leaders or having actual leader rotations where you have internal politics in the your civilization, and that might lead to new leaders being elected or old leaders being deposed and stuff like that, which is all possibly way too complicated, especially if each of those leaders is going to have an ability. I think the big issue with having a lot, and I would love it. Like, I would love if they had more alternate leaders, and I think there's actually, a lot of room in the game to actually have leaders change over time, which I pitched in the last episode. But you do run into the issue of there just not necessarily being enough like known historic figures for certain civilizations compared to others. And then, like, if you have mechanics where that's necessary, you run into the problems of, well, can we even include this civilization? Because, we have maybe one or two leaders, but if we need 10 of them to make the game work, then, do we have to leave civs out? So that's another thing where it's a balancing line between what fits within the abstraction of the game and what's actually, practical.
I'm just thinking of the Civ, or not the Civ, the CK2 quotes when you plot murder people. And you start having people taking over for your leader and new children and stuff, and the world is just too cruel for children. It's unfortunate. That snake got into the crib again.
Again.
Well, it'd be a little odd if the child died to wine or manure explosions.
Well, I mean, it's not that it couldn't happen, but, snakes again? Do we need pest control around here?
I think it's just a curse. You need to blame it on the adjacent kingdom. They're devil worshippers. It's fine.
It's not totally because you want their land.
Well,
that's just a bonus.
Yeah. I won't refuse their land.
So, to Steve Spain, thank you very much for the feedback. We hope you enjoy the next episode, even if your conclusion is, man, I'll enjoy it a lot more when Dan's no longer a recurring guest. Well, I never. I'm just trying to create controversy where there is none. Whether I'm a regular co-host or a guest, I should be consistent. Oh, speaking of consistency. Oh, there you go.
I did say I would show you some.
You did. I haven't given you the opportunity. Yet.
Speaking of opportunities, I don't know if there's a proper segue out of that one.
If this was a proper segue, Mackie, then it wouldn't be PolyCast. So
this is true. This is true. We've never done proper segues. Yeah. Anyway, Bengal Ryan 9 started a thread over in Civ Fanatics talking about, is an ancient era start actually balanced?
Nope.
Next topic.
The game to make it balanced. So, like, even the developers and the game itself acknowledge that. So
yeah. But he's having the problem of, he gets started, he thinks it looks like an interesting start, it's going to be a fun game, and somebody spawned next to him. Oh dear. And it doesn't matter what he does, he'll sit in delegations and stuff, and they'll come after him. So he has to start so many games, and he doesn't get one that's going to last longer than a little bit past into the classical, because he has to get like this just the right start. Like, you got to have your back up against the coast or something like that, or have a nice little mountain range. He's like, I just want to be able to start in an ancient era and be in the middle of the map and have people around me and be able to fight through that and not get overwhelmed. Is it just the level I'm playing, or is it the ancient era start? It's like,
well, deity is supposed to be hard, but
I think they're saying even on standard difficulty settings,
yeah,
having these issues.
Yeah,
so.
They're not playing on day. Well, no, he is. He says he's good, but
he did mention he plays and wins on deity in the majority of his games. So I would imagine that does mean the majority of his attempts are also deity. That being said, while I have seen some maps that would be very difficult to win blind on deity, they're pretty uncommon. If someone's saying they had like 5 close to unwinnable starts in a row, I don't believe it. I would raise my eyebrow at 2 in a row. I mean, it could happen because you can have flukes at those kinds of small sample sizes.
Well, it looks like he's specifically trying to look for a non-coastal start that's actually viable, and then ends up being surrounded by like 5 hostile civilizations, and there's nothing he can do to make them not hostile. And that is a problem with diplomacy. There's a lot of ways in both Civ 5 and Civ 6 to make the AIs angry, and not a whole lot of ways to make them happy and like.
And you do like kind of have to know information that's under the hood to really game the AI to its potential. And the other alternative is to simply beat everybody at war, which is possible but difficult and very grindy.
Yeah,
but you can do it, certainly. Even on deity, you can. It's just sometimes it's really annoying.
And in my opinion, that problem gets even worse as you increase the difficulty setting, because the AI gets so much free stuff. And I've talked at length before, and I've written blog posts about it before, about how I am also very frustrated with the front loading of challenge in the Civilization game. I would very much hope that a large design emphasis for Civ 7 is to spread the challenge out over more of the game, and to like add things in the middle and late game that like
impossible. I'm sorry, but I didn't want to interrupt too much, but it is impossible to do that.
Well,
anytime you have a game where like a small advantage can snowball into a more significant advantage over time, you will necessarily have front-loaded difficulty. And the best you can do, I think, is to end games that are over sooner, and to design mechanics that allow for that more seamlessly than Civ has ever done.
Is disgustipated in the... Oh, go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say, I agree that it's exceedingly difficult. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that it's impossible, but I would hope that the people at Firaxis at least try to look into some ideas for doing stuff like that. And it's clear with the Rise and Fall and Gathering Storm expansions, with the Dark Ages and with the natural disasters and stuff, they're trying to go in that direction. It's just whether or not it's enough.
You just can't do it in a 4X or even something kind of like a 4X. As you expand, your options are greater, and the number of things your opponents could do to counter you, especially from an AI perspective, are reduced. There's no way around it. As you improve your relative position to the AI, the game will get easier. There's no way around that. And the whole reason it's challenging early is because of the huge bonuses they have over you. There's the sheer volume of crap they start with. But the more you equalize that, the less challenging it's going to be necessarily.
Well, and it came up in the last topic about how Firaxis has stated that they are not designing the artificial intelligence to win the game. If they were designed for that, I would actually be feeling a little more strongly towards this person who has started this thread. And in fact, Disgustipated had said that I was expecting from this forum title that this would go the other direction. I was thinking the human has more advantage with the era start, because all those decisions the human makes better than the AI add up over the course of a long game. And Ancient Era also gives humans more time to develop and catch up, quote unquote. You're going to have that initial rush if you are surrounded by AI, because they're going to have more stuff, and they're going to throw more stuff at you. The advantage that we have as a human player is, we're knowing that. And I'm not saying that, so then it should just stay in the game, Dan. You don't think that there's a problem. It's kind of, if you know that is coming, and you can plan for that, and yes, there are going to be times when you're going to get screwed over, but if you know that, and you're exploring, and you see who's around you, and you get that notification that, or you see on the screen, hey, they're unfriendly towards you. They've denounced you on turn 10, because they just plain don't like you, which is a separate thing about diplomacy and whatnot. But I think it's one of those, the human player in the Ancient Era, your advantage is to be able to plan ahead for that, and to be able to, once you get past whatever that rush is, which is also a barbarian question, I'm going to get to that in a moment, but when the AI is coming at you, if you can contain them, and because the AI doesn't really react very well to what it is that it's trying to do in response to your counter actions, right? Like, I'm going to move here, and I'm going to do this, and you send units to surround it. I'm just going to go ahead and do what I was going to do anyway. So I feel like if you can get past that Ancient Era and you can survive, then you're going to be able to thrive. So while the Ancient Era, to me, is kind of your biggest risk, but it's also your biggest reward as a human player. I totally get the frustration, particularly about the Barbarian thing. Adding the Barbarian thing in there, I know we've talked about that before. It's a reason why I disable barbs. Yes, it's a controversial thing to go ahead and disable them. I get that. I'd actually like to see what we had a little bit more in Civ 4, where you have your standard barbs and your raging barbs to have a little bit more flexibility there. So while I think it's frustrating, I think if the Ancient Era was actually balanced, it would be boring. in the sense of, well, it's always going to be this way. I'm always going to, or I'm more likely to be able to do what it is that I want to do without a challenge, and to be unchallenged, and to be unchecked.
I do think they could make the starting positions a little more fair, though, because sometimes they still aren't. Like,
Yeah. And when the human gets luck screwed with the starting position as compared to the AI, because the AI, as you increase in difficulty level in particular, as we've said, they get more stuff, they're able to mitigate that better than you are able to mitigate that, which I agree, yes, that does suck. So as you play the game more, you're probably better off being able to tell, you know what, this is not a very good starting position. Go ahead and if you decide, like, I'm going to rage quit and I'm going to start over, I think that's fine.
I think it's not even a question of, like, AI games. Just, like, sometimes you get starts that are so ridiculously good or bad that it just skews the game. And I guess you can have a setting for that, like wild starts or whatever, but if you just want to play a normal game, getting those environments, I don't know.
This even happens to me at normal level sometimes, is that I want to start a game and I just get one, like, Phil was talking about the wild starts. I'm not asking for the wild start, and it gives me that, like, I'm shoved over. We have this multiplayer too, where you're shoved in some weird corner, and it's like, on one hand, it's interesting to try and get out of that situation, but sometimes you just want to start a normal, average game, and it's like map gen. Please put me in a spot where I can work with this and have a nice long game instead of, like, you come in and you want to do a game, and you want to try one of the other victory conditions, like you want to try for the diplomacy thing or something, and it puts you right up against, like, Montezuma and Genghis Khan. It's like, that's not what I wanted, because that's a very
you can set your AI opponents, to be fair.
Yeah,
I've actually had the reverse issue too, where, like, I'm trying to run a Civ to get a feel for them, and then they just dump me near, like, some national wonder that just, it gives me more than double the normal starting production through the first 10, 20 turns, like egregiously more than you could possibly expect to see on some other starts. It's like, oh, okay, I mean, I can just do generically anything now, and I'm going to win, but all right, I guess.
Yeah, you get the magic easy mode start sometimes, too, and it's like,
Yeah, Goody Huts can play into that a lot, too. Like, you get the free builder.
I turn that crap off.
Something like that.
I do not play with Lucky Huts. No Lucky Huts.
Yeah.
If they ever fix barbs, I'll put barbs back on. They just, from what I've heard, they haven't fixed it yet. But
yeah, and
barbs still have their same issue.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, nope. Yeah. And I totally get why people disable Goody Huts. I like Goody Huts, but it is a luck win or it's a luck screw. There's no question about that. If we had even more game setup options, like, for example, someone who, like this person, and you were getting at Mackie, and I think all of us, I just want a calmer start. And rather than having to, restart. I mean, yes, you can hit escape and press restart. You don't have to go back to the game setup every single time. But still,
after a certain amount of times you do that when you want to start a game, you say, screw this, I'm going to play something else.
With regard, real quick, though, to the Goody Huts, I was actually recently playing John Schaefer's At the Gates for the first time, like last weekend or the weekend before. And one of the things that game does that I thought was kind of interesting was at the very beginning of the game, like you only start out with the visibility around your immediate area, just like in Civ, but like they kind of have like drawn in the background in the fog of war, like some of the features of the map that are around you that you haven't actually revealed yet. So you can see some resources and you can see the location of some nearby the equivalent of Goody Huts in that game. I forget what they call them. Like towns or villages or tribal huts or something like that. But it's the same mechanic. You walk a scout there and you get a randomized reward. So in that game, you actually do have an idea at the very beginning of the game, like from turn one, like where the Goody Huts are. So it is then not entirely up to random chance whether or not you can get them. And I feel like that's probably something that could be done, equalize all the different players in Civ's ability to at least get a couple of the nearby Goody Huts. So it's not like, because sometimes you run into that situation where you just send your settler or explorer off in the wrong direction, right? And then you don't get any Goody Huts because you sent your scout north and all the close nearby Goody Huts were to the west and the south, and you don't get anything and everyone else gets good stuff. But if you knew where they were and the game gave you some guidance right there on turn one about where you should try exploring to find useful stuff, maybe that would help balance that out without having to just remove them entirely.
It does reduce the variance to
might.
some degree, but you still have
might.
variable rewards, and you still have variable distance between start positions and goodie huts, almost certainly. So you're still going to get some problems from it, but they would be reduced.
But for Bengal Ryan 9, if in the game setup it was, okay, whatever map type you're choosing, I would like a minimum, or you can even set a maximum distance between myself and another AI. Or between yourself and an AI. Any AI at all. You could either choose to use that option or not choose to use that option. So if you want to give yourself some breathing room, you could give yourself some breathing room. And I think we would love to see that, for instance, in cooperative multiplayer, along with, I don't know, maybe some distance between humans and human to AI and AI to AI, so we're not all, squished together in the corner, or someone squished over there and not able to get to their opponent while, the rest of us are dealing with their AI and everybody else. But it would give, in the Ancient Era in particular, that kind of breathing room where you're not feeling overwhelmed by the player, because I totally get the argument, that's great, Dan, that the human player may be able to take advantage of the Ancient Era, and if they survive the Ancient Era, then they're going to be able to prosper and perhaps do something, but it's actually surviving the Ancient Era first. And it even came up in the thread, the person was speculating, well, what if I do a later era start? And that also came up when someone was like, well, you realize at a later era start that the human, that's where you start getting a lot of human front-loaded things where we're able to make better choices in terms of, you can have so many things initially in that setup based on the point system or whatever it is that they have. So while that's a whole separate consideration, I would rather that not be the answer to you're not feeling happy with the Ancient Era, and just give the player some more control over that.
Yeah, the solution to the problem should not be don't play the first half of the game.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to skip that just because for something different, that's fine, but because this is not balanced and everyone agrees that it's kind of a cluster something or other, then let's just go ahead and skip it. That's not addressing the issue. The Ancient Era, it should not be people don't want to play the Ancient Era because they feel like I'm just going to get raffle stomped every single time. It doesn't matter what difficulty level I'm on. It doesn't matter if I make all the right choices that the game gives me. And this is something with the the distance between civs. I think that would be, or like the least, I think that would be something simpler than let's improve the diplomacy. Which I also think that should be there too, but in the meantime, if we just kind of give that breathing room, then the AI can be over there doing whatever it is that it is doing, and then try to then have it so that the human player is in a position to, okay, now I have comparable number of units to the AI. I'm in a better position. I know what it is that I'm doing. And I think kind of getting raffle stomped by the AI early on, when it's like the AI doesn't even know what it's doing, they just happen to have a lot of stuff given them for free, and they just shifted their weight on the right way, on the right turn, and it's like they're not even going to appreciate the fact that they did a good job because they're not even trying to win.
Or you can just build a couple units and kill it. Although you can make a case for these later era starts in terms of being able to interact with the mid to late game options without the game's outcome being decided already, because you are literally starting in the mid to late game, depending on which era you pick.
Especially if you have a civilization that has a lot of their uniques, backloaded, like a civilization like America, where their unique units are, industrial and modern units.
Might not be a good example since those aren't very good, but yeah, that's true.
It was the first one I thought of.
Yeah, and in other Civ games that would be more pertinent for sure for America.
I could make this so PolyCasty, but of course an American would choose America to use as an example. But we don't need to go down that road. It's all right.
Well, I do Canada prevents surprise wars, but that doesn't necessarily solve all of their problems, especially in the late game.
Right. Well, and one other way to deal with the start of the game perhaps being too hard might be to just use exploits and cheats, because we've been I'm sorry, the E word and the C word in the same sentence. Whoa. Right. Yeah.
It's a good thing I was sitting down for this recording. Thank you for the warning, yes, Jason.
I'm sorry, should I warn people first to sit down before the next topic?
We're going to use the C word.
Yes. It could cause serious internal and or external injury to all gamers if you're not careful.
So if
the show can't afford the lawsuits, they just can't afford the lawsuits.
Yeah, medical liability waivers for all our listeners from now on. by opening the episode title or the recording, you are agreeing to waive all liability.
Not so as if he's spraying something.
Yeah, we'll put that in the pre-recorded legal disclaimers for the beginning of the show from now on. We might have a show title there too. You might want to sit down for this.
Now bend over.
There you go.
No, Phil.
So
that's for the paid version of the podcast.
yeah, wow. So with the popularity of YouTube pundits and social media and stuff like that, one of the consequences of that is we have a lot more exposure of cheats and exploits in not just Civ but a lot of games. And in particular, there's a couple of YouTubers that I watch a lot of who do a lot of Civ 6 content, including exploits. There's Potato McWhiskey, who does some exploit videos, but mostly focuses on strategy and game mechanic stuff. And we've referenced some of his videos in episodes past, particularly with regard to how the heck the dang culture tourism victory works. And then there's also a YouTuber called the Spiffing Brit, who does nothing but exploit videos for lots of different games, but he seems to have a particular fondness for Civilization 6, because he's done 5 different videos on Civ 6, and I think the only game that even comes close is maybe Skyrim or Oblivion.
And recently Bannerlord, because that's early access and it shows.
But yeah, so there are some pretty serious bugs in Civilization 6 that allow for exploits. Some of them include being able to reselect the same Pantheon over and over and over again and stacking the same bonus multiple times. Others include getting infinite gold through diplomacy from the AI, although I think that one might have been fixed in a patch, I don't recall. And then the most recent one is apparently you can exploit the build queue to be able to plop the same district in a city as many times as you want, and then stack a bunch of adjacency bonuses. You can exceed the district cap by doing this, and the particular case that the Spiffing Brit looked at was the Molly's unique district, which gives you I think 20% discount towards buying stuff in the city. And if you plop down 5 of those in the same city, that is a 100% discount on purchasing things in the city, which means gold purchasing of units and buildings and other stuff costs 0 gold.
Yep.
Which, to say the least, breaks the game. So the
Pantheon one does too, right? Because
right, yeah.
There's really no limit to the number of settlers you can use that for, or because you can mix and match, you can also get a bunch of the other Pantheon bonuses in addition.
Oh, you can alternate between the one that gives you the builder and the one that gives you the settler.
Yeah, you can get a whole bunch of both of those for free, and then you can pick another Pantheon and stack bonuses.
Which
there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, the free builders and settlers you can basically use to turn yourself into a deity AI and have all the bonuses they have.
Oh, more than that, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then some if you chose to. But yeah, the big point here is there's a lot of exploits, and these exploits are a lot more public now than they used to be, thanks to the popularity of YouTube and all these pundits who make all these videos about it. And I just want to say, if you're playing in multiplayer, please don't use these exploits. I mean, you're just going to make everyone else's play experience miserable, and you're probably just going to get yourself booted from the game and banned from playing in that group later. So it really does not help anybody. If you want to play around with them in single player just as a gag, feel free to do so. I don't, I'm sure you probably can, cheese a lot of achievements and stuff like that way if that's something you're into, or fill up your Hall of Fame with ridiculously high scores, which now makes the Hall of Fame completely moot for comparing actual game performance.
It kind of has been anyway, unfortunately. But yeah.
But you've got people who can essentially have an infinite score, whatever the heck arbitrary score you want, you can get by using these exploits.
And I guess you could break turn count with this really hard. If you took somebody with Victoria's skill level and just used this to its maximum potential, you'd break the game. And what fascinated me about this topic, and as in the past on Civ Fanatics 2, of course, some people will probably remember my exploit discussions from maybe even a decade ago at this point. Geez. So something like this is so obviously egregious and centralizing that not using it against people who use it is unwinnable.
And it blatantly breaks the rules.
Yeah, it's so blatantly against what the game rules are that most everyone could easily agree that it's an exploit. On the flip side, Potato McWhiskey in one of his videos commented that some people actually accused him of cheating by enabling the leader heads that show like the production and science and all that from other civilizations, even though that's actually a vanilla game feature that you could just check.
That's not
in the
even
menu.
a mod anymore. That used to
it's
be a
not a mod.
mod, but Firaxis
Not
thought it
anymore.
was such a good idea, they put it into the game.
So people have accused him of exploiting the game by using what is literally an intended in-game feature, objectively speaking.
And to be
these
fair
are
to
two
those
ends.
people, however, to be fair to those people, however, is a lot of them, I think, did not know that was actually an option in the game that you can turn on. They thought it was a mod.
Even
So
so,
they
though,
accused
like,
him of-
that information
Yeah.
is available to you elsewhere in the game. So that is a quality of life information presentation at worst.
Right, which
So
Phil is
this is
strictly
pretty
in
obviously
favor
on
of.
one side of the spectrum, right? Like it would not be reasonable. There's no reasonable definition of exploit that would capture that and like not also ban gameplay entirely. Whereas it's pretty easy to look at something like what Skip Biffing Brit Showcase and say, okay, like this breaks the game so hard that you can't play the game normally if this is involved.
Right.
So, but to me, what's always interesting is the discussion on things that are more in between than that. For example, not necessarily stacking 5 districts, but locking in the cost of your district long before you actually bother to build it, for example.
Which I do all the time in single player.
And yeah, and according to the game rules, that's consistent. Like the rule is what it costed when you placed it.
And you have the question of, well, the AI doesn't know how to do that, so is it unfair that, not only as the player, you are probably placing the districts in superior positions because the AI, as we've said many times before, doesn't think too far ahead very well, but then you're also, making them cheaper for yourself, which, it is in a gray area whether or not that is a cheat.
It is, but my problem with this when it comes up in multiplayer games, when it comes up in discussions of single player, like formats like Hall of Fame, is that you need consistent standards for it, like for where you're drawing the line. And what the AI example is one that often bothers me actually, because if you use the standard, well, the AI doesn't know how to use this.
If the AI doesn't know how to use air units.
Yeah, the AI doesn't know how to use air units. AI really doesn't use its great generals properly. The AI can't even use range units properly.
Well,
like
they
if
do
you
use
fight
their
the
great
AI,
generals. They do
by
use
that
their great
standard, you
generals
expand the game.
they do use their great generals and admirals as scouts, which is actually a really clever use for them that I didn't think of, and the AI actually taught me a lesson there.
Maybe. All I'm saying is that, like, if you use that as a standard, like the AI doesn't do this, then you can't fight the AI in the game by your own standards because that's exploiting it. So, like, that doesn't work. You can't say that then. And it's certainly caused angst in various communities, not just in Civ, but certainly on Civ Fanatics. I've seen these discussions over and over again in multiple Civ iterations, starting from when I was very, very prevalent on the forum in Civ 4 and probably before that too, but that's when I started seeing it. And I don't know that there's a good answer because some of the stuff is gray area. Like you can make a multiplayer game and just have everyone in the game agree to specific things you can and can't do. But then like there's always this guy who throws out, okay, well don't exploit the game, but they don't know, like they themselves don't know what they mean when they say don't use exploits. And that bothers me because there's always disputes over this. It doesn't matter if it's Madden, the Civ, StarCraft, I don't care. Like you always have somebody complaining about this. And so like, when it comes to don't use exploits in multiplayer, that's a sticking point for me. I mean, don't use obviously broken centralizing mechanics that force everybody to use them to be able to play. Okay, fine.
I think for me personally, one of the big criteria would be, is this something that could commonly happen, like accidentally or incidentally, by playing the game in good faith? And I think the idea of pre-placing the district to lock in its cost is a good example, because you might over the course of the game plop down a district with the full intent of building it, but then someone like war decks you and you decide, oh crap, I need to build an encampment instead. So you stop the building of the commercial hub or campus or whatever the heck you were building and build an encampment so you get that extra bombardment. But in doing so, you've locked in the cost of that other district. So, that's not something that you did in bad faith or to be malicious. Whereas if you are clicking escape at the same time you select your Pantheon in order to spawn 100 settlers, that's something that you very deliberately did.
Well, the relative value there is not even comparable, too, right? And that's that has to be part of the evaluation process. The degree to which this influences the game has to matter when we're considering this.
That's the other big factor.
Yeah, swapping the district thing is a small minor influence. That one city got a bonus. Sitting there and doing the escape thing for the Pantheon to get like 20 settlers in the first few turns of the game. Well, first like 20 turns or something. But yeah, that's a much bigger long-term effect.
But even that standard is not like universal, because the build queue thing where you can queue up the same district multiple times, like that's something that you could hypothetically do accidentally by just shuffling around, stuff in your build queue, because the game will let you
was discovered
for some right, yeah, because the game will for some reason let you queue the same district multiple times in the queue, and until you actually finish it, it won't remove them, because the game doesn't recognize that that the district being in the queue counts towards the one placement of the district. Like if it did that, it would solve the problem, but it doesn't. So hypothetically, you could just queue up a bunch of districts, and then maybe you accidentally queue up the same district multiple times, and then you're shuffling the order, but you don't delete the duplicates of the districts, and then you do end up with the same district being placed multiple times, and that could happen accidentally without you deliberately trying to cheat.
Although you probably wouldn't see like 50 of them, but yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. You could certainly do it by accident.
Well, and for a player playing in good faith, if that were to happen, you would almost certainly be placing the duplicates of the district in the same location, because that's where you want the district to be. So it would be exceedingly unlikely to find someone who's playing in good faith have 6 commercial hubs placed in their city accidentally.
Yeah, I don't think it would be easy to convince people that was
accidental, guys. I didn't mean to put that many Sailwinds down.
I don't know. I just got this lag spike, and then all of a sudden,
6 Sailwinds.
Right, but I could see a situation where you place like your commercial hub down, and then you realize, oh crap! If I buy this one tile, like it'll have like it's in the middle of this snaky river part, and I'll get a +4 adjacency bonus instead of a +3. And then, that's even better, because then I can put my theater here, and it'll be adjacent to other districts, and then stuff like that. And then you do change the location of it, because a lot of people have asked for the ability to like actually cancel the building of a district, or even being able to delete existing districts to build it somewhere else, because a better location does come up as the game situation changes. Like that's actually something that people do want in the game. And this exploit kind of sort of maybe allows you to do that in certain edge cases. But yeah, it is still something that is, that if you actually create multiple copies of the same district, or you break the district cap, you are breaking the game's rules, like very clearly and blatantly.
Speaking of lag spikes, there's the age-old question of double moving people. Like,
could you please explain how that works? Because I'm only vaguely familiar with the concept, because I don't play a lot.
Say we're at war, and I wait until there is like 1 or 2 seconds remaining in the turn, and then I move a unit in like next to your city, and then right as the turn rolls over and the next turn starts, I just attack you with that unit before you get a chance to react to it. Or I could use units to attack one of your units at the end of a turn and then kill your unit before you react on the following turns. In other words, I get 2 attacks on a unit before you have an opportunity to do anything with that unit, because you didn't see it coming.
Which is something that is, I think, fixed if you use the dynamic turn thing, where if you are at war, then the game does switch to fully turn-based instead of simultaneous moves.
Yeah, you can do that, but if you're playing with simultaneous turns, which a lot of us do, that's I mean, strictly speaking, this does not violate any game rules whatsoever. The game is actually working exactly as intended, and yet you could certainly make a case that it's not fair if you are going from a true turn-based strategy game aspect.
Yeah, I like to think of the simultaneous turns as like a convenience thing rather than like intended, how the game is supposed to work. So I would personally consider that an exploit, because it is a turn-based game, and in single player you cannot do that. So yeah, I would definitely consider it an exploit. But
well, in single player you can do it, but it's worthless because the AI's reaction time is instantaneous. So it doesn't matter how many things you do right at the end of a space of time before you end your turn.
The turns in single player are also never simultaneneous.
That's true. They are functionally sequential. But I would imagine that even if they were simultaneous, you would be hard pressed to outorder the AI Because that's one of those things that, unlike, say, long-range tactical planning or long-range strategies, the AI's reaction speed is very, very fast compared to humans. I think you would have a very hard time double moving the AI when it, in fact, be at risk of getting double moved by the AI instead.
So yes, I've been very, very quiet, almost completely quiet so far on this topic, and I want to kind of work my way back from the most recent example that was just given about the double moving question in multiplayer back to some of the other examples. So first off, double moving, this is a multiplayer specific thing. So for a lot of the people playing Civ 6, they might say, what's multiplayer? But I wouldn't go so far as to call it an exploit like you did, Jason. And I'm thinking back to the idea of an exploit, thinking about definitions, and it's already come up about exploit, where a player is using, a bug or a glitch to give themselves an advantage in a manner that's not intended by the game's designers. And because Firaxis put in simultaneous turns into the game, okay, I think that you're right, that you're also giving up the security of the turn-based for the convenience, I should say, of the simultaneous turns. So, does that, even as a cheat then, a person who behaves dishonestly in order to gain an advantage, they're clearly working to gain an advantage. Is it dishonest when it could be a reasonable expectation that someone else could do that to you as well, like another human player? So to me, it's very subjective, and it kind of comes down to the people that you're playing in the group. If you don't want that to happen, then that should be something that should be agreed on before the game starts. Let's acknowledge, are people aware of this, yes or no? Let's do this, let's not do that. And then if you do it,
if you definitely don't want it to
then
happen,
you are cheating.
You could disable simultaneous turns and play in the either fully turn-based or dynamic, and that would, effectively solve
then the game
problem.
would force that on you, yes. But as a kind of like a social exercise, if you still want simultaneous turns, you still want the advantage to do that, okay. And I think the cheat would then come where you already had the discussion beforehand. It was clear we're not going to do that. And then you turn around and do that, now you are cheating. Because that is not the intention of the people who were playing the game, because you said and everyone agreed not to do that.
If you agree to do something and then you don't do it, or vice versa, that's a little bit less ambiguous, and it's not ambiguous at all any longer.
Exactly.
And it's also a lot harder to claim that it was accidental if you previously agreed not to do it, because that means that you should be consciously aware of the fact that you should be avoiding doing the thing. So don't put
That's actually not true, because some people are pressured by the turn timer. So they might be very, very barely able to end their turn on time in the middle of the war. And then because that's where they're looking right at the start of the next turn, right? Like they just barely got their move in, and now their units are right next to the units that they need to fight. Like, so, okay, now they're looking at that, so that's the first thing they're going to do on the following turn. Like, I could see people who actually don't have bad intentions double moving unintentionally very easily, especially if they're time pressured.
Yeah, I suppose you're right with the turn timer on, definitely, yeah.
And you would then have to look at how often is that happening and the frequency and the time over it, because, it can happen incidentally, but if you can establish a pattern, make an argument that the person is doing that, then, okay, it wasn't just because of the turn time and lag or anything like that. No, you're purposely doing that, which, of course, is a bigger subjective question.
Well, sure, but if you're going to do this in bad faith, you better be doing it when it counts and not otherwise. And so that's actually not going to be that easy to tell.
I mean, no. For me personally, one of the reasons that I play Civilization and I like Civilization as opposed to, a real-time strategy like, say, StarCraft, is because I confess I don't have the fastest reflexes in the world, and I do not as much enjoy games where, like, actions per minute or clicks per minute is one of the largest deciding factors of whether or not you win. So to me, using a tactic like that is, in bad faith almost automatically, but that's just a personal preference thing, because I play Civ 6 because of the fact that it is turn-based, and I have the time to think about my moves before I actually, execute them. And in fact, I don't think I've ever played a multiplayer game with the turn timer on because of that very fact. And that does mean that occasionally, you have to sit for a long time while one of the other players makes their move. But, I always play my multiplayer games with a close-knit group of friends who I know very well. So I know if they're taking a long time to take their move, it's, because they're doing stuff. It's not because they're, just trying to waste my time or be malicious or anything like that.
And that kind of goes to the whole social aspect of the multiplayer aspect.
StarCraft APM is not decisive, like not truly decisive until you're at really high, like really top percentages of play.
Well, true. But even in a game like, again, I talk about a lot, Madden, I don't play, online on Madden because, a lot of the, a lot of players in Madden, take advantage of, like things that I just don't have the time to practice to get good enough at doing. Like it's a lot of muscle memory, like doing audibles and hot routes and stuff like that with the defense, doing like 20 inputs, controller inputs in a matter of just a few seconds between breaking the huddle and getting to the line of scrimmage and snapping the ball. And I just can't do that. I've never learned the muscle memory, and just B, I just don't think my hands work that fast. So I pretty much can't play online unless I'm playing, with someone who I know who's going to agree not to do that, because I just simply can't keep up.
And this is where I think it becomes important that the game and structuring something in multiplayer allows, for example, going back to Civ, to say, no, we don't even want to get into this question of the, of the double moving or whether you do it unintentionally or not. Let's just avoid it. So the game has the mechanism so that the game can force it not to happen because of the dynamic timer. Yeah. Whereas if you decide you want that and you're willing to sacrifice that potential, and you find a group of people like you, Jason, that feel comfortable with that and not having the turn timer and playing it with the dynamic and not rather keep it that turn-based nature, then I think that that's great. And I don't necessarily think that the game should try to force that social constraint, but just enable it so that whatever people want to play it as a preference, that they can use that as a preference. And if people don't like that they can't do that, then they should just go play something else. The developer and the publisher have made the choice that no, right. I do not value that particular view of how to play this particular game, and therefore, I guess you're not part of the target market. Or you can go to a modder and say, please help.
To be clear, to be clear, in that example that I just gave with Madden, I do not consider that actually to be an exploit, right? It's just very high-level play
of the game.
that I can't do.
Yeah,
but
pretty much everyone is ranked.
Yeah, but because I can't do it, it does mean that I am at a disadvantage against players who can, and it just is not a fun experience for me because there's nothing I can do, as a user with my limitations to counter that, because I have a full-time job. I'm sorry, I don't have all day, every day, like all these 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds on who are playing these games to spend doing nothing but playing Madden all day.
Come on now.
Yeah.
I learned the high-end user control as a working adult.
Well,
in fact, it would probably be a nightmare playing against me online if you're not used to what you would see from good players with defensive user.
If you actually have Madden on the PS4, Phil, I would be happy to play a game with you.
I'm not sure I have it for PS4. I have it for the Xbone.
Ah, crap. All right, well, enough of Madden cast.
But yeah,
okay.
The high-end stuff is pretty nasty. Like, if you're running something like a streak flag combo, I can read that, and I will intercept the flag if you're running it too frequently, very easily.
Yeah. And there are play concepts.
With my middle linebacker, I will intercept your breaking route.
Well, they were supposed to have fixed that in Madden 20, but I don't know if they necessarily did. And yeah, there are play concepts
I just go there.
flat out broken.
Like, I know you're going to do it, so I just take my user over there. Like, I'll pattern read, right. And if you don't have an in-breaking route from the opposite side, then I'm going to go and take away your flag.
Right. And well, unfortunately, one of the other things with that game is you have to know enough about the meta of the game to be able to do that. Because I don't play the game online, I don't know which of those plays and routes combinations are broken. So even as a defender, even if I could make those adjustments, I wouldn't necessarily know to. Yeah, because I don't know that my middle third safety is going to go and cover the streak down the sideline instead of the post route in the middle of the field like he's supposed to. I'm sorry, I assumed that my football player was going to know how to play football and actually correctly play football.
Well, that's why I quit ultimately.
Yeah. But, again,
the game doesn't work. That's why I quit.
Yeah, sorry. Again, enough Madden cast.
Well, no, to kind of tie in Madden back to Civ in the sense of not knowing the meta part of that. The discounted district thing. I mean, that is not something that I think a player should be able to, I think I should know that if I buy that now, I'm going to lock in the cost. Setting that aside for the moment, people calling that a cheat, a person who behaves dishonestly in order to gain an advantage, you're absolutely gaining an advantage. There's no question. And I think it should be addressed. No question about that. But if a person who does that...
But I don't feel like that's dishonest at all. Like that's
no, I don't think it is.
Rules.
That's the part. That's right. It's not. I don't think it is dishonest at all. I think it's something that someone has taken advantage of because they know about the advantage to be taken of in the first place. And using your example, Jason, where someone decides to build a commercial hub and, oh no, suddenly I've been invaded, now I need to switch over to an encampment. Yes, you've locked in that commercial district costs, but you also don't have that commercial district yet. You would need to remember to go back to that. And it's also possible that, hey, I've locked in the commercial district cost. That's fantastic. Oh crap, I just got word act. I need a district. My population is too low. I can't build another district right now. So you've actually... No, certainly wouldn't intentionally screw yourself, but it's like, oh, I guess I can't build an encampment now because I was trying to lock in the cost of something, and now I've got to find some other way to deal with this threat than building an encampment right now. Because you're probably not going to be able to turn around and, I said, unless you were, had more than one possible district that you could build that you haven't done that yet, there is a cost associated with that. So I don't think anybody building a district, I don't think that's a cheat. Do I think that the developers intended that to happen? I would like to certainly think not, but then again, I'm not a developer.
I don't know.
Well, it seems
It's like pre-planning effectively is part of the game, right? In so many other facets. So why not this facet too? Because there's certainly an element of pre-planning if you're going to commit to a district like this, just like you said.
And there actually is a check against that, which is the district limit by population, because you can't just plop all your districts down right as soon as you settle the city. You do still have to get the population to unlock the slots, and then you can put it down as soon as you unlock the slot and then come back to it 20 turns later or whatever. But there is a built-in check against that prevents it from being like completely, exploitative or manipulative.
I would just like to point out there is one other valid way to handle double moving, by the way, and that is to just allow it straight up so that everyone does it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's an agreement that, have at it, then by all means, it makes it pretty straightforward. Again, back to what does the group think about this? Yes? Okay.
Gentlemen's agreement some groups the players. Either we do it or we don't.
Yeah.
And then, yes, inevitably there will be times where there'll be groups of people that didn't know about it and it happened. And it's like, wait, what just happened here? And then it depends on the group. How do you want to react to that at that point? Which is also possible. And then you learn. And if people aren't going to go with the general consensus of the group, then again, I guess you're not playing in that group anymore because people are not going to have it.
There are another interesting, I think, example to this sort of topic is looking at board games, because there are a lot of board games that do not have fixed turn orders, where either the players actually with the turn order might be randomly assigned each game round, or the players basically buy or auction for turn order, or where it just automatically rotates to the player to the current first player's left or something like that. So you can have situations in a lot of those board games where you do get two moves in a row compared to another player because the turn order changed between turns. But in the case of a board game, as opposed to Civ, that's something that's in the game's rules. So that's actually part of the strategy is, I'm going to make these moves at this time in the game because the turn order is going to be such that I'll be able to double move and maximize its effectiveness and minimize the other player's ability to counter it. For example,
I would counter that if you were playing under the rule environment of simultaneous turns, that double moving is actually part of the game's design at that point as well, just like it would be in a board game.
Perhaps.
Right down to the option of not playing that way. You can simply not pick simultaneous turns and not have that be an issue.
Right, which is what puts it, probably on the not exploit side of the fuzziness. I still think it's in kind of a gray area because it,
so many things are.
I do
bothers me when someone starts using inconsistent standards. Whatever standards you use for something you don't like, I want that to be applied for everything you consider about the game. Not just counting sometimes and not counting other times. When people start counting some things only when it's convenient, that's when I have a problem.
Right.
The whole, and to go back to the other examples, the whole somebody calling somebody up for cheating because they enabled the ribbon for the information. That's already been covered. That is the most extreme. I don't even know if I can have why do I even have to respond to that? I
know, I read that, and I was like, what are you talking about? That's a thing that's right there in the game that they added because players asked for that, and a mod put that in there originally, and they said, hey, actually, it's a good idea. We should do that by default. And it gives you short access to things that are already in menus in the game. It's not like it's new information it's pulling from somewhere. If you go down and go through some of the reports in the game, you can find all that stuff. It just puts it there conveniently for you so you can keep an eye on things.
But again, to be fair to those players and to cycle back to Phil's recurring point of bad UI, a lot of those players, if not all of them, just didn't know that was the case in the game. Not a lot of players knew how to find that stuff beforehand because the UI is not great, and finding those reports and reading those reports isn't, probably as user-friendly as it should be. And then, yeah, again, there were a lot of people who had been playing the game before that feature got, added by Firaxis and just didn't know it was there because it's not enabled by default. You have to go into the options and change it. So if you didn't read the patch notes and know that it's there, you didn't know that it was there.
Oh yeah, but as soon as they put it in, I went looking for it. It's like, where is this? Because I need this. I am tired of being up.
And I would certainly hope that those players responded to Potato McWhiskey, or I would certainly hope that those viewers of Potato McWhiskey's channel, rescinded, their criticisms or complaints, after the fact. And say like, oh, I
probably just stopped talking. Roasted. After they got roasted,
they realized, crap, yeah, I'm going to start using this now because that's awesome.
And the ribbon thing not being there, that's less about is this a cheat or an exploit being exercised by the player and derp from the developer and their UI. Like that's on.
Yeah, that information should have been easily accessible the whole time. Because not everybody is the type of nerds who are digging through all those other reports.
Like I've seen people claim that information that is available otherwise, but is compiled by like a mod or something, is also unfair / cheating, even though all that information is present in the game already. But the act of making it more easy to access is somehow bad.
Yeah, no, that I don't fear that as cheaty or exploited on the part of the player. That's just good. That's good resourcefulness on the part of the player, recognizing that this is something that should be here, but it's not, and you went out and you found it. And you're using that mod or someone using that mod doesn't mean that they have exclusive access to that mod. Just like, hey, guess what? Guess what? I just locked in my commercial hub. You can't lock in your commercial hub. Nope, it was only me. Whether that was purposeful or incidental. Every player can replicate this. And also back to the point of the AI can't do that. That doesn't mean that we don't do it. That just means we address things with the AI.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be allowed to use air units. But yeah. In the situation of multiplayer, if you are playing with a mod, whether it's a UI mod or a gameplay mod or whatever, my understanding is if you start a multiplayer game with other people, they have access to that mod as well. Like it's automatically downloaded and installed into their game for that multiplayer session. So I don't think you can set up a situation unless you like crazy hack the game and like definitely are cheating where, I'm playing a game with Phil and Phil has a UI mod that makes, that gives him access to a lot of information that's hard for me to find, and I don't. Because there actually is a legitimate case to make where if the UI mod gives you easy access to information and there's a turn timer, and it's just not practical to go through all of those screens within the turn timer limit, like I could see a case for that being an exploit. But if you're playing in multiplayer, everybody should have access to that same mod. So it's not that Phil has it and I don't. It's we both have it, and it's whether or not Phil's using it effectively.
I think either it's you start the game, someone has a mod, like the person who's hosting, for example, has this mod. Oh, everyone's now going to have this mod, and it automatically gives it to players. Or it makes it clear you cannot join this game until you have this, because the host has this and they've enabled it for the purpose of this game. Then everything is transparent, everyone is clear. One player does not have an advantage because they knew it existed or thought to find it and realized they couldn't see it on the screen or they couldn't check all these screens. Everyone is on the same page. The thing about the spiffing Brit and the whole Mansa Musa unique district and the spamming these districts, or the thing about the Pantheon and pressing escape, okay, that's once again something very clear to me that is something that is not intended, that is... I mean, it's being very purposeful, and you are trying to gain an advantage over everybody else. I think the other thing that comes into is once this comes about, and really to kind of wrap around back even to the open mic topic in part, and yes, Steve Spain, I am going to say this in another context. I hope you're sitting down. Man, I sound really aggressive with this preface. But anyway, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't when it comes to talking about cheats and exploits. Because I must admit, when we first started talking about whether we were going to talk about this topic or in general, I was kind of like, oh no, we're just going to highlight the exploits and then people are going to go out there. And then we decided, no, we're going to talk about like exploit versus cheat in general and what are the edge cases, because it's the gray area that it gets really interesting, because there are other things that are very obvious for anybody who's playing the game that, well, this is way out in left field and it shouldn't be. And I think that having it presented in this way, whether it's social media, YouTube, or before that, these things called forums as an example, or even just people emailing back and forth, thanks to this little thing called the internet, we're more aware of these things. And as the awareness comes about, the hope then is that the developer and publisher go, Now that it's been raised by the community, maybe we should do something about it. That's kind of the other thing. These things that are coming up, I hope that for the really extreme cases, I'm not talking about the gray stuff, because the gray stuff is, well, we'll let the player decide that for themselves. But I can't believe, I don't want to believe, certainly, that was ever the intention of the developer for this to be the case, so that it gets addressed, and it gets addressed in a patch. So that everyone, it's like, okay, hope you enjoyed that time for that exploit and that cheat, but that time is now over. Let's move on. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. You made the game better. You raised awareness about it.
The awareness isn't, for me personally, it wasn't to make this, to increase awareness among cheaters. My hope for bringing this topic up, because this topic was my idea, was so that everybody knows about these exploits and potential cheats, so that if it is used against you in a multiplayer game, you can hopefully more easily recognize it and then, take whatever appropriate measures are necessary, either kick the player or ban the player or make, gentlemen's agreements in the future to either both agree to use the exploit or both agree to not use the exploit. Because there might actually be some really fun multiplayer to be had in everybody agreeing to use these exploits and seeing how crazy the game can get.
Just who can abuse this the most?
Yeah, there is that. You could probably get a game or two out of that, maybe.
And even in some single-player context, like Hall of Fame, for example, raising that awareness, so if someone's, they're supposed to submit the save to confirm, hey, look at this, I achieved this and doing that, then I realize not all of this is easily gleamable just from a save. But even in more general, if you choose to use this in your single-player game, hey, that's your single-player game. My personal view is that you're cheapening the experience for those really extreme cases where, like, come on, that's not playing the game as intended, but, well, you are playing the game how you want to intend, and that's fine. But if you start sharing or start talking about that, then you're going to quickly find the people who are in favor of, oh yeah, I like doing that too, let's compare. And those that are just saying, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. And for those really extreme cases, I would like to see those removed from the game completely. But even if not, then I'm just going to make the personal choice to not do that, and I would like to interact with people who also make that choice. And if that's the way it ends up being, then that's the way it ends up being. Man, I want to start singing Kumbaya, but I won't. I'll just put that topic. I'll just put that thought out there.
Well, I'm glad that you came around.
Oh,
Time for
speaking of Kumbayas, yeah. Speaking of Kumbayas.
Well, this has been episode 60 of Poly. Thank you for joining us. I'm Makahlua. My co-host today, DanQ.
Thanks all.
TheMeInTeam.
I'm sure you will agree to my special tactics.
And MegaBearsFan. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that didn't come through.
Oh, Jason? Jason went to squash some people. No, Jason has taken up a quest. He has fallen down the hole of trying to stop all exploits and cheats from happening in all games, not just Civ. Jason, we wish you well. Come back to us. Please.
Fuck, man.
Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
Oh no, someone 360 no-scoped him. Oh.
Oh, there's his exit line. All right.
There's his exit line. All right.
All right, let's do the closing again. We did take two. All right, take two for the closing from Take Two. Okay.
Is that it? I don't know. Fix it in post.
Testing.
This thing is not
my
behaving.
mic working? What's going on here?
Now we.
I put in the right thing and now it doesn't want to do it. Oh my gosh.
Did I hit a hardware mute or something? What's going on?
Now says anyone who doesn't do post-production, fix it in post. That's well said. That's like with modders. Forget all this exploit stuff. Just fix it in a mod. Leave me alone.
Yes, I don't know what I did wrong there, but yeah, you'll have to put the proper ending thing.
Or not. Maybe we like some PolyCast episodes that are like that. Just like we like games with cheats and exploits in them. We were like
PolyCast game that never. PolyCast thing that never ends. Lol.
Oh, let's talk about game design for PolyCast. Yeah, let's do that. That can be the next episode. There we go. All right. Can have a whole series on it.
You're making me want to go and get some alcohol. It's too early in the day for that.
It'll stop eventually. Does this work?
Theoretically, that's okay. I can fill the space. I have no problem. Oh,
At least I got to stop.
There's that. Okay. Civilization 4, 5, 6, and beyond are sound clips. Copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright the PolyCast at thepolycast.net.